Talk on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us on News Channel 5 Plus tonight on, for the first time in a long time, a Monday following a Titans loss. 4 consecutive wins. The winning streak snapped Thursday night in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. 40-17 was the final score. I know Mike Mularkey believes, and I kind of do too, that it was a closer game than the score ultimately indicated. But it also was a game that really kind of exposed what has been a problem for the Titans so far this season. I want to get your take on that tonight. Now that you've removed yourself from that game a little bit, call us up at 737-7767. What were your thoughts as you watched it? Because so many people looked at this as a primetime showcase for the Titans to prove to the world and show the NFL the type of team they actually are. And on Thursday night, they weren't able to do that because, in my opinion, the mistakes that we've seen throughout this year crept up again. Which we saw Thursday night were penalties. This team's actually really good at limiting the penalties generally, but costly penalties at key times. We saw obviously 4 turnovers, 4 interceptions from Marcus Mariota. The offensive line woes continued where the running game was not blocked up as well as it needed to be, as well it was a year ago. Mariota was sacked 5 times. So the offensive line didn't even do what it has been doing particularly well this season, which is pass blocking. Now the last 2 weeks, they've really struggled in that regard. And defensively, while it's been much better as of late, finally the secondary got exposed. Ben Roethlisberger throws for 4 touchdowns. Antonio Brown gets 3 of them. How do you feel about those mistakes? We've seen them before this year, and obviously the Titans have figured out a way against most teams to overcome those. We saw against Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago the drive late in the 4th quarter. They had some mistakes in that game that made it a game. Rashard Matthews drops a touchdown. That's similar to Delanie Walker dropping a touchdown against Pittsburgh. The difference is, though, to me, is Pittsburgh took control. The Bengals weren't good enough to take advantage of the mistakes the Titans had. Other teams haven't been good enough. The Browns weren't good enough to take advantage of a couple of missed touchdown opportunities in those games. So the Titans were able to finally put the mistakes aside in Cleveland or against Cincinnati or some of these other games they've played this year and put those games away and put them into the win column. But when you play a team as good as the Pittsburgh Steelers or some of these other contenders in the AFC, you can't afford to have those mistakes. And that's what we saw on Thursday night when the Steelers just kind of pulled away and it became a 40-17 game ultimately. As I look at the Titans moving forward, they simply have to play better, starting this week in Indianapolis. Because as you look at the schedule, and let's face it, the Titans are 6-4. They're in a great position right now to get to their first playoff since 2008. But there's no guarantee there, and you can't afford to continue to play like this because otherwise at some point it will catch up with you. They're a favorite to go to Indianapolis and win. For the first time ever in Lucas Oil Stadium, by the way. They should be favored in 2 weeks against Houston here with no Deshaun Watson at quarterback and that defense is beat up as it is. Arizona, San Francisco, I know they're road games, but those are teams that are struggling and are beat up at this point. Those are the type of games that if you're the team that the Titans believe they are, if you're a playoff team, you go there and you win. But you're going to have to play better than you did Thursday night in Pittsburgh and frankly have for much of the season. To me, I hope that Thursday night serves as a bit of a startle for this team. That they can't continue with this malaise and just sort of a, not that they've been laissez-faire or relaxed through the first part of the season, but I believe they're so confident after what they did last year and the way they've started the season in large parts that they maybe have lost a little bit of that edge that focus edge that they had last season when they had no margin for error at the end of the year. The way last season started, the way they played towards the end of the season, was a response from a team that no longer had any margin for error to keep its season alive. And they played inspired and great football. And they have a margin for error right now. I mean, even after the loss the other night, they're still essentially 2 full games up on a wild card position. They're only a game back in the division. That's ultimately the goal, and everything is still in front of them. But with that margin for error can come complacency. And I think what you have to hope, and I think what the locker room has said anyway since Thursday night, is we understand that we can't play like that. We have to be better in every phase. We can't turn the ball over. We can't have dumb penalties. The offensive line has to come together. Defensively, we have to get off the field on third downs, hold teams to field goals instead of touchdowns when they have drives. Those are the types of things that you just have to do. And if you don't do them, and if you don't do several of them in a game, you're going to lose against a good team. And that's what happened on Thursday night against Pittsburgh. Your thoughts on the game and how concerning it is? Because I've asked this question before, in that as they started off 6-3 and were in first place, that's obviously a great sign when you're in first place. But they hadn't played their best football to that point. And I kept asking the question, do you believe in this Titans team as a first-place team, as a playoff team, as a division champion? Or do you feel like these things will catch up with them at some point, and in a way that can doom what they want to do this year? Doom them in the division, doom them looking for a playoff berth, all those sort of things. Do you feel different after watching how Thursday night's game in Pittsburgh went down? Do you feel differently about this team or what they can do this season because of the way that game unfolded? 737-7767 is the number. We get started tonight with Tony. Tony, thanks for the call. You are first up here on Titans Talk.
Hey, man, I was just calling concern. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the call.
Right. I just look at it as 17 points to win football games, man. I just think, shout out to Dick LeBeau, man. I just think we need to tighten up on our defense, man, our secondary, man. I think that's what we weak at. I think the offense is straight. I just think the defense is too weak. Good football teams are putting up 40 or more on us. That's weak on the defense. It has nothing to do with the offense. I think we need to tighten up our defense if we want to make it to the playoffs and get deep round in the playoffs or to a Super Bowl team.
Well, it certainly was a problem the other night in Pittsburgh. You can't give up 40 points against just about anybody. But to their credit, the only other team to put up those types of numbers against the Titans this year was the Texans in a game that just got away from them early on in the season.
Tough quarterbacks that could pick defenses apart. Tough quarterback.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had a pretty decent performance against Derek Carr. They did a nice job against Russell Wilson early in the season. But I see your point. The big thing for the defense, though, is up until Thursday night, that was a defense that allowed 2 or 3 touchdowns in a 4-game span. That's pretty good. I think what you have here isn't necessarily a point the finger at one side of the ball or the other saying we need more of the offense or more of the defense. To me, it's a consistency problem because we've seen the defense have a couple of stellar games here lately. Thursday night, they weren't. We've seen the offense put up 30-some points a few times this year. But Thursday night, they turned the ball over 4 times and put that defense in some rough spots at times. To me, on both sides of the ball, they need more consistency, and they've got to avoid those critical mistakes, whether that's a turnover or a penalty, whatever it is. They have to avoid those, especially against good teams.
I agree with that. You opened my eyes to another opinion, but I still stand behind 17 points is enough to win a ball game.
Well,
no matter what your quarterback doing, we won band, we won sound. If my quarterback throw 4 interceptions, it's the defense side of the ball to step up and pick the play up and get him back on the field so he can make a better play.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with the offense. If the offense is not making plays, it's the defense. The whole game falls back on the defense, in my opinion. I'm a true Titans fan. I respect Dick LeBeau and his defense, but I just think our secondary get picked apart a lot.
Yeah, well, Tony, I appreciate the call, and I think you're right. The 2 sides, or actually the 3 sides, if you throw in special teams, they have to work in concert with one another. It is a three-phase game, and they all have to show up. I do think you need to give the defense some credit from the other night, because when Marcus Mariota threw two pretty bad interceptions in the first half of that game, Pittsburgh had short fields. They were inside the 30 twice to start drives in the first half of that game the other night, and the Titans defense held them to just a field goal. So you went to the locker room the other night down 16-7 at the half, with those being two of them. It very easily could have been 24-7 at the half the other night. And then it's a totally different game, and you feel like they just got blown out. Where the defense made it a 16-7 game, you score on the first play of the third quarter, it's 16-14. You have other chances in there to really make it a game. Unfortunately, that's where the mistakes, the really critical mistakes, killed this team, and eventually the dam broke and the Steelers just pulled away in the fourth quarter of that one. But give the credit to the defense early on. Unfortunately, I think in the second half of the game, they're probably on the field a little bit too much, and that secondary did bend a little too much. And look, that's a fair point about this defense is, I mean, the biggest concern the last couple of years was, what do you do in the secondary? This secondary seems overmatched by a lot of the elite quarterbacks and elite wide receivers in the league. They've taken a huge stride this year with Logan Ryan and Adoree Jackson, but the other night against the best receiver in the league in Antonio Brown and against Ben Roethlisberger, they didn't make enough plays. Now, is that just one of the best offenses in the league connecting, sort of hitting on all cylinders, and difficult to defend for anyone? Or is that a sign of concern for the Titans as they move towards December and the stretch run here that you think other teams can take advantage of? Curious of that. 737-7767, the number tonight. Back to the phones we go. And David, thanks for the call. Hello, David.
Hey, what's going on, man?
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing great. Fire away.
Man, what's going on with the Titans with Eric Decker, man? I mean, I'm expecting more out of him.
Good question. He actually had a pretty decent night the other night in terms of targets and catches, and had a couple nice third down conversions there. But I agree with you, for a guy who has made his living throughout his career on third down and in the red zone scoring touchdowns, the fact that he has the target number that he has at this point, maybe not as high as people expected, and the fact that he only has one touchdown, and I can't even really think of many more targets in the red zone than that this year, I think has to be concerning. I think he's a bigger weapon than the Titans have utilized him as so far this year offensively.
I completely agree. And Mariota, I feel, is falling behind. He's dropping the ball, man.
Well, that we can debate for a lot of different reasons. Is his limited offseason because of the devastating leg injury last year and not being able to work on some of the things you might normally if you were healthy? Is it the hamstring injury early this season that obviously limited his mobility? But here's the other thing. As you look at it, 8 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. That's woefully disappointing in the strict numbers sense. But in just the last 2 games, think about this. Delanie Walker, your all-pro tight end, has dropped a wide-open touchdown in the end zone. Rashard Matthews, your leading wide receiver, has dropped a touchdown wide open, walking into the end zone. And your number 1 pick, Corey Davis, has fumbled a ball through the end zone on what could have been a touchdown pass if he didn't do that. So that's 3 touchdown passes in the last 2 weeks he probably should have had, which, by the way, changed the complexion of those games. The Bengals game isn't a last-second win then. It's a sizable, comfortable margin of victory for the Titans. And the game in Pittsburgh, I mean, if Delanie Walker catches that pass, the Titans might have the lead if the certain things break right, but certainly they're right in that game going to the fourth quarter. Instead, he drops it, they get a field goal, and the entire tide and momentum of the game changed. So while Mariota's play and the 4 interceptions are certainly concerning, he has to be better. I think you also have to look at everybody around him, too, because they haven't helped him out much.
Well, I really believe that we should be seeing some more out of DeMarco or Henry. I mean, we're just not seeing enough from that side, you know? Yeah,
well, and I think, and David, I appreciate the call, I think a big chunk of that goes to that offensive line. They have to be better than they've been to this point of the season. A year ago, you could have made a real case that that group was the best offensive line in football. It's the same group back right now. And they're not getting it done at nearly the same rate. And that's got to be concerning. All right, back to the phones here. Let's go to Brian. Brian, hello.
Hey, this is Brian Reyes. First off, I want to say way back I played offensive guard, and I definitely agree with your statement on the offensive line. Although I don't think that they were the very best in the league, but they did really pick it up in the second half of the season.
They were up there, though. You could have made the argument last year with the conversation about like the Cowboys or some of the other elite lines in football. You could have put the Titans in that conversation last year, and no one would have laughed. They would laugh right now if you tried to do that.
Yeah. Well, Quinn Spain, Taylor Wan definitely really picked it up. But I also want to shout out to my man Tony. I definitely believe he's right on the whole defense thing with the secondary, especially our secondary. They do get picked off a lot. They have picked it up the past 3 games, and arguably they would have won us the game, especially with Kevin Byard getting like 3. I don't know. He's had 4 interceptions in the past 5 games.
Yeah, well, he had 5 interceptions in 2 games going into the last one. So.
True Blue MTSU. I'm also an MTSU alumni.
Yeah, well, obviously a lot of people down there in the borough are fired up about Kevin Byard, and rightfully so. I think if the season ended today, he should be in the Pro Bowl with the way he's playing.
Yeah, especially with the way he's been playing. But also, I would like to say that Mariota, he has thrown it. I mean, our receivers are not really getting enough separation to receive that ball. So Mariota, I mean, with that, his window gets smaller.
Sure.
His mistakes, he's open to more mistakes. So I believe that with the defense right now, they've done a very good job of improving, and they have scored us some points and arguably won us a couple of games. But if we can get that connection between Mariota and our receivers, maybe get a little bit more separation, leave the option open.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. And, Brian, thank you for the call. The defense is taking strides. Is it one of the elite defenses in the league? No, but it has definitely stepped up this year. And when it comes to Mariota and the receivers, there's blame to go around here. I mean, the first interception the other night, that's all on Marcus Mariota. That is a sailed ball that he just overthrows, and you can't afford to do that, especially at that position of the field. The second one, that's Corey Davis not finishing out a route against a defense. That's as much on the wide receiver as it is on the quarterback, as bad as the throw itself looked. You see other examples of that throughout the year. So some of it's on Mariota, but some of these interceptions are on the receivers. So if he's got 10 interceptions for the year, which is too high, it's one more than he had all of last season, I'd say it's about 50-50 in terms of who gets the blame right there. But at this point, what they have to figure out how to do is not worry about pointing fingers, but figure out how to clean this up, because there's 6 games left to go here in the season. And while they're in a great position right now, I think everybody's in agreement, even in that locker room, that they have to play better, starting this weekend against the Colts, to have a shot at getting to the playoffs or winning this division, which was ultimately their goal when they set out at the beginning of the year. I want to get one more call in here before we hit our first break. Let's go to Jan. Jan, thanks for the call. You're next up here on Titans Talk.
Hey.
Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Doing well. Go ahead.
That was a good game Sunday. I think that I think the fight fell out of the Titans when DeMarco dropped that pass. It was just,
You talking about DeMarco early in the game, or did the Delaney Walker touchdown?
Delaney Walker dropped that pass.
Okay.
I think that was a big turnaround in the game to me.
Yeah.
And I also feel like the Titans should cap. I mean they come in with a game plan, but it seems to me like they aren't attacking a lot of the weak parts of the other teams. It's like they come in with their game plan and they stick with it, whether it goes or whether it doesn't go. And a lot of these teams have like if the run stops, throw the short pass. Don't persist with it. 3 and out, and then you got to change your game plan at some point.
Yeah, I would like to see, and Jay and I appreciate the call, I would like to see them get the running backs involved a little bit more, maybe in the passing game. Because right now, if the offensive line isn't blocking things up for the scheme to run the ball as effectively as they did a year ago, or at times early on in this season, I still think you have to figure out the way to get the ball in the hands of DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. Those guys are too good to just say, well, they're bottling up the running game. But the other part to me about this is it's just execution, simply. As you look at the other night, that was a Steelers secondary that was beat up. Joe Hayden was out. They had 2 backups in at safety. That was a secondary that you wanted to be able to exploit. And what happens is you got some wide receivers run some wrong routes. You got a tight end who drops a ball. You have another missed assignment here. Your quarterback gets sacked against the pass rush. He throws 4 interceptions. I don't think it was necessarily the game plan that was the fault there. They just didn't execute it. And we've seen that other times. I know one of the pet peeves for Titans fans, and really all fans, is when things don't go well, you pick on your coach's play calling. What's the offense doing? Why are we calling that play? The play caller's got to go. If you look back the last few weeks, to me, this isn't a play calling issue. There have been plays that have been schemed up that have been brilliant. They've been schemed up to get touchdowns or big first downs. The Titans just haven't executed by and large. And that, to me, as I look at it, is the biggest thing here. They have to execute better in every phase down the stretch of the season if they ultimately want to get to where they want to go. All right, we got to take a break. We are running behind here. But we'll do that. We'll come back more of your phone calls, 737-7767, the number. Lines are wide open for you right here on Titans Talk on News Channel 5+.